I woke up earlier than usual that morning. The sun hadn't even warmed the floor yet, and I was already dressed in my soft blue dress, the one my granddaughter once said made me look like an old movie star. I spritzed on a little perfume, just a little, jasmine, the same scent I wore on my 40th wedding anniversary. I set the table with quiet care, even brought down the crystal glasses from the high cupboard, the ones that only come out for special days. And turning 80, that should be special, shouldn't it? I baked a coconut pineapple cake, my son's favorite. I set out board games the grandkids always begged to play. I even fluffed the couch pillows in the living room so everyone would fit comfortably. Every little detail touched with anticipation. By 10 a.m., I was still smiling. By 11, I told myself, they're probably just getting ready. By noon, the cake had cooled and the smell was fading. I turned on the TV, not to watch, just to fill the silence. No one came, but I didn't let myself feel sad, not at first. When you love people, you create excuses for their absence. I told myself maybe they were planning a surprise. Maybe something came up. I stayed in the kitchen, slicing little pieces of cake, not because I was hungry, but because I needed something to do with my hands. At 2 p.m., I texted the family group chat. I wrote, "Is anyone lost on the way here? I'm home." They read it. No one replied. I sat back down, hands folded. The silence was loud, heavy. Funny how memories carry scent. In that quiet, I remembered the first birthday cake I ever made for my son, the one he dove face first into before we even lit the candles. I remembered tiny hands making glittery signs that read, "We love Grandma," taped to my walls. I remembered family beach trips when I paid for everything with barely enough left to cover groceries. I was always there. I was the lunch packer, the fever checker, the bedtime storyteller. I was the stay-up-late sewing costumes mom, the take the bus so you can have the car kind of woman. And now, I was the woman who sat alone at her own 80th birthday, unnoticed, forgotten. I stood slowly, picked up my phone, thought about calling, maybe begging, but before I could dial, I opened the photo app, just curiosity, just a reflex. What I saw froze me. There they were, my family, all of them, my children, my grandchildren, even my sister. There were balloons, a decorated table, laughter, cakes, but what made my knees weaken was the name written in frosting. It wasn't mine, it was another woman's name, and that's when I knew the party was never meant for me. I sat there, phone still in my hand. The cake I'd baked that morning felt like a joke now. All that effort, the polished silverware, the ironed napkins, the laughter I had rehearsed in my head, gone, evaporated. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't forgetfulness. They made a choice, and I was not part of it. I don't know how long I stayed frozen. My hand was trembling slightly, and I hadn't noticed I was holding my breath. It felt like a betrayal you can't quite scream about, because if you do, they'll call you dramatic, sensitive, too emotional, old. I stood up and walked slowly into the bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed. The springs creaked under my weight. The same bed where I nursed my babies through colds, where I held their father's hand when his lungs were failing, where I sat alone the night I paid off the final mortgage bill, smiling through tired tears. They don't know how many things I said no to, so they could say yes. They don't know I skipped dinners, new shoes, vacations, so there'd be food on the table and birthday gifts wrapped in cartoon paper. And I never asked for much. Just time, presence, a call, a seat at the table. But this silence was a message, loud and deliberate. I wasn't just forgotten. I was replaced. I looked down at my hands, wrinkled, thin, the same hands that held them when they were sick, signed school slips, buttoned tiny shirts, cut crusts off sandwiches, now trembling, holding a phone that showed me exactly where I stood in their world, outside the frame, and that's when something shifted inside me. Not anger, not revenge, clarity. I wiped my eyes, stood up, and took a long breath. I went to the closet, pulled out my old brown coat, and found my walking shoes. If I was going to be excluded, they were going to have to look me in the eyes as they did it. I wasn't going to hide in my house and pretend this didn't happen. No, I was going to the party. I walked the 12 blocks in silence, not because it was far, because my heart was pacing faster than my feet. I passed by the flower shop on 8th Street, the same one where I used to buy birthday balloons when the kids were little. The owner looked up, almost waved, but I just nodded and kept walking. Every step forward was a step away from denial. When I turned the corner onto Maple Drive, I could already hear it. Music, clinking glasses, bursts of laughter. Voices I recognized, my grandson's loud cackle, my daughter's high-pitched, "Oh my God," the soundtrack of a celebration I was never supposed to see. I stood across the street for a moment, watching. The front yard was decorated with gold streamers. There was a white tent, a long table covered in food, dozens of guests, and there, standing by the cake, my son, the same one who told me he had work all weekend, the one who used to run to my bed when he had nightmares, now raising a glass for someone else. I crossed the street, slowly, deliberately. I didn't want to sneak in. I wanted to be seen. As I stepped through the gate, the noise began to die. One by one, heads turned. A fork clinked against a plate. My granddaughter froze mid-laugh. My daughter-in-law's smile collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. My son. He turned last, his expression somewhere between guilt and panic, like a child caught with crumbs all over his face, but still trying to pretend the cookie jar's full. He took a step forward. "Mom," he said with a forced chuckle, "what are you doing here?" What was I doing here? I wanted to ask him that exact question, but I didn't say a word. I looked at the table, the cake. It was chocolate, not coconut, vanilla icing, not pineapple cream, and written across the top in gold cursive letters, "Happy birthday, Martha." Martha, the name of his wife's mother. A woman I'd shared maybe 5 dinners with, polite, cold, the kind of woman who always corrected your grammar before answering your question. I looked at the guests. Their eyes were heavy. Some looked away. Some had the decency to look ashamed. Still, I said nothing. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't beg for space at the table. I just looked. Let them sit in their discomfort. Let the silence speak louder than I ever could. Then I turned around, walked back out, same pace, same coat. I heard my son call after me, "Mom, wait!" But I didn't stop. Somewhere between that gate and the sidewalk, I stopped being invisible. Back home, the house welcomed me with the same silence I'd left it in. But this time, it felt different. It wasn't a silence of waiting. It was a silence that knew. I took off my coat, sat back down at the table. The candles had melted into crooked wax. The frosting had cracked. I looked at the cake, and for the first time that day, I picked up my phone, opened the camera, took a photo. Just me, the half-sliced cake, and the quiet. Then I wrote, 80 years today, just me and the cake. That's enough. And I hit post. At first, I didn't think much of it. Just a photo, just a few words, just the truth. I set the phone down, not expecting anything. But an hour later, it buzzed, then again. Then it wouldn't stop. 1 comment, then 10, then 100. This broke my heart. You deserved better. Happy birthday, beautiful soul. Reminds me of my grandma. I wish I could hug her one more time. I don't know you, but I love you. I didn't understand what was happening. Old students started tagging me. This woman taught me how to read when no one else had patience. She used to bring extra snacks for kids who forgot their lunch. Best teacher I ever had. Neighbors I hadn't seen in years shared the photo. She helped me after my divorce, watched my daughter for free. She used to leave soup by my door when I had COVID. The story spread. Thousands of strangers, people I had never met, called me seen. Someone even started a hashtag, Grandma with the cake. I laughed, really laughed, not out of bitterness, but out of disbelief. That a moment so small, a lonely cake, a quiet room, could remind people of something they'd forgotten, that elders feel, that presence matters, that love can be invisible until it's not. By nightfall, I had more birthday wishes than I could count. Flowers started arriving at my doorstep. A group of local kids came by and sang "Happy Birthday" under my window. A cafe I used to visit sent over breakfast for the week. A bookstore mailed me a handwritten card with a novel tucked inside. And my family? They called. Of course they did. Voice trembling, trying to explain, trying to justify. We didn't mean to leave you out. It was just that Martha, it wasn't what it looked like, but it was, and I didn't need their explanations anymore. I wasn't angry, just clear. I told them I'd heard everything I needed, not in their words, but in their silence when I was standing right there in front of them. They offered to redo my birthday. I smiled kindly. "Thank you," I said. But it already happened, and honestly, it turned out better than I imagined. That night I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The moon was soft. The world, somehow louder and kinder than I'd remembered, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel forgotten. I felt seen. I stood by the window for a long time, phone still warm in my hand, eyes dry, but heavy. I remembered the time I stayed up until 3 a.m. sewing a lion costume for my son's school play, the time I sold my wedding ring to help my daughter make rent, the year I skipped buying a winter coat just to get the kids each a Christmas present they'd remember, and none of that is on Instagram. There are no posts for the sleepless nights, no reels for sacrifices, no likes for loyalty. I sat down again, ran my fingers along the wood of the kitchen table. This table has stories, gouges from math homework, red crayon from a granddaughter's tantrum, a faint coffee stain from the day my husband told me he had cancer. It's not just a table, it's where a whole life happened. But today, it's just me and the cake. I opened the door. The cold air met my skin like the truth had met my heart, uninvited but undeniable. I walked slowly, past the corner where I once waited in the rain for my son's school bus, past the street where I taught my daughter to ride a bike, cheering her on with scraped knees and a full heart. Every block held a memory, and tonight, every memory weighed more. Neighbors were setting out trash cans. One man nodded at me, but no one asked where I was going or why my hands were trembling. The world kept spinning, even as mine had stalled. And still, I walked. Because something in me, maybe pride, maybe pain, refused to sit quietly and vanish. I didn't expect it to matter so much. A photo, a few words, a cake. But it did. And maybe that's the lesson, that we live our whole lives thinking we have to do everything to be loved, to give, to serve, to keep quiet, to show up even when they don't. But sometimes it's in the quiet moments, the ones no one else notices, that we find out who we really are. I'm not angry anymore, not even disappointed. They showed me who they are, and the world, strangers, neighbors, forgotten students, showed me who I still am, worthy, seen, loved. I turned off the porch light just before midnight. The flowers were still on the table, the cake had gone dry, but my heart felt full. So if you've ever felt forgotten, if someone made you feel small, invisible, uninvited, please remember this. You are not a leftover. You are not a burden. You are not too late. You are still here. And that is enough. If this story reminded you of someone you love or someone you've lost, I'd be honored to hear about them in the comments. Sometimes all it takes to feel remembered is one shared memory. Thank you for staying with me.